Good morning. Welcome. And I wanted to start with a very short piece of an interview from a lady, Lauren Fix from Car Coach Reports. She's talking about a pretty, I guess, sensitive topic these days, which is Amazon and auto. But let's listen to a part of it. The link is in the video. So if you want to check out the whole thing, highly recommend. She's a really great lady. I've interviewed her on the channel before.
Amazon changed the way America bought books, clothes, electronics, and groceries. And now it's moving on to the auto industry. And if you think this is just another online shopping feature, you're missing the real story. Amazon isn't dipping a toe into car sales. It's positioning itself to become the central hub for buying new and used vehicles, and the consequences for automakers and dealers, as well as independent media and referral sites, could be massive. This isn't a future concept.
That's about it. So let's watch the rest of it. If you want more, here we go.
You, Ian Nethercott, the host of the Auto Hub Show.
All right.
Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility.
Mom.
At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
Hey, I'm Vince Delmonico, General Sales Manager with Cruise Ford Lincoln. Larry Feldman came out and did one of our training courses. Absolutely incredible. I sat through the course myself. The engagement that our salespeople gained from it, the excitement that he brings, it was a new way of looking at things that we're already doing and how we can improve them. Love it. It's literally the best thing since sliced bread.
How do you adventure? Is it fast? Is it free? Is it clear? Is it rugged? Is it remote? For your next adventure, trust MotoClose for buying, selling, trading, and protecting all of your motorized assets. Powered by Disclose Dealership Management Dashboard, your all-in-one DMS, CRM, menu, lead gen, inventory, staff, client, and deal management solution. Disclose DMD, like a DMS, only better. Mention promo code AutoHub2025 to get special pricing, including waive setup costs, no contract, and your first month's free.
Meta, Instagram, social, and your team is still waiting for ups like it's 1999. Let's be honest, your market isn't watching TV commercials, they're double tapping and engaging with your competitors on social media posts. People are shopping these days for cars and servicing their vehicles in between watching cat videos. That's where we can help. Retail Resilient is the go-to authority for social selling in the car industry. Whether you're a new car franchise dealer, an independent, a buy here, pay here, a broker, a dealership owner or manager, we have something for you. Remember, when your lot is quiet, it means your social media is not loud enough. Check us out at retailresilient.com so we can retarget you on our social media feeds.
All righty. And good morning. So let me just go into that. There we go. So we're going to start with Karen, since she was the first person on this morning. So Karen, good morning. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you do. And what do you think the car business is traditionally, since it's a 30-day business traditionally, how do you think we can change that in 2026 as we prepare for a new year? Go ahead.
My software is really focused on fixed ops.
Okay.
Basically, what we're trying to do is show the dealer where they're losing profit in parts and service. And it's a huge problem. but they don't realize it for a couple of reasons. First of all, in order to determine it, they usually find out at the end of the month whether they made the money they wanted to make or not.
Right.
Instead of looking every day to see, where profit was leaking. My software shows them that. But as far as I'm concerned, as a dealer should look at where they want to be. And that means starting with every day. They really need short-term, daily, weekly, monthly, and long-term. Because otherwise, what I've seen, and I'm sure what you've seen over years, is at the end of the month, that's when they say, we should have sold more cars, we should have done more service. Instead of setting, let's say I had a weekly goal. And if they reach that, then that creates excitement for the team. If they don't, it allows them to sit and look and say, what do I need to change? So that's my recommendation.
So do you think that that's partially because it's a 30-day business model that they've traditionally stuck to, or do you think there's more to it than that?
I think it's what they've always done.
So it's
And
just not changing.
Even though,
Yeah.
no, and even though there are tools available, both in sales and service, to assist them in improving that, so many are not using.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. So Michael, tell us more about what you do, Mr. Eagle, and also what do you think on the 30-day business and how that's impacted things?
I guide sales associates and sales managers and GSMs and GMs at double their sales volume and an increased PVR at the same time. And I do it in store, side by side with them, showing them how to get more leads and helping them get more leads, showing them how to close more deals and then helping them close those deals so they could do without me eventually, and how to put more money on the books on every car deal.
Fantastic. So what do you think on the 30-day side for 2026? Do you think that that's the reason dealers are having challenges, or do you think that that's fine? What do you think? Is it the 30 days mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that successful businesses that we would look at today, like, I don't know, like Microsoft or Nvidia, that are $4-5 trillion companies. I don't think they look at what the results are at the bottom line at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and they measure their business that way. And I don't think third-party investors on Wall Street look at it that way as well. There are companies that are worth 10, 20, $30 billion that are losing $1 billion a year right now. So why they're worth 30 billion? For what the growth is, they're reinvesting in their growth. And if you take a big company like Amazon that's worth several $1 trillion right now, there was a time where Amazon lost money every year, and the stock kept going up, and the company became more valuable. They bought more Prime trucks. Now you trip over a Prime truck when you go get your car in the driveway. They build warehouses to store their goods all over the place. It's one near my home here in Florida. They have server farms that are hundreds of acres and have hundreds of thousands of GPUs in these $1 billion server farms. That's from the profits they would have made 10 years ago, but they reinvested in themselves. And looking at my business and managing in 30-day cycles, am I going to make 100 grand this month, 500 grand this month? That's certainly very, very critical. But at the same time, am I reinvesting in my business to grow my business? Great examples, dealers that the air conditioner goes out with $60,000 put in an air conditioning unit, say, so we're going to wait till next year. And I said, so we're going to wait till next year. So in the meantime, salespeople quit and customers don't want to buy car service. It's 85 degrees in the building. And that's just an isolated example. There's dozens of examples that are dumping over dollars to save pennies. And it's easy to you and I to speak about it and critique that. It's a different situation because we got the cheap seats. They've got the $40 million invested.
Right.
So there's a balance there. But the balance certainly should be in the long term, because The value of dealership is the value of dealership. Does it make 100 this month or 150 this month? Or is the value of the dealership, if I'm gonna get 10 times blue sky, I'm gonna sell for 10 million and 30 million in 10 years from now. A great example of that is personnel, and that's the most expensive component of our business. And it's also what determines whether we do great or the opposite of great, which is just good.
Yeah.
So I have an associate, finance manager who's making me $4,500 a car. He's making $40,000 a month, and the dealer can't believe it because how am I paying this guy so much money when other finance guys make $25,000 a month? So he says, "Oh, well, let's cut their pay. Okay, let's cut their pay and get a guy that does $3,000 a car instead of $4,000 a car, and we lose $90,000 a month to save $10,000 a month." As an example.
Oh yeah.
And I see it all the time. And and a big issue in that regard, those books that come out every month, NADA books, NCM books, and they got the grids and they got the slide, the 12-inch ruler and the color pen, and we sit around and say, "Well, your comp is 18.8, but my comp is 17.2, and your market is 27.3, but mine is 29.1." And you can't put these percentages are important, and you need to manage around them. But that's the 30-day mindset. The mindset to me is I want to grow a business that's bulletproof and indestructible. I want the best players in the market to want to be on my team and lead my team and make my team a Super Bowl winner every day. And that you don't get that with the 30-day mindset. I can't tell you how many salespeople I've overpaid to recruit and keep that have made my stores literally $1 million a year more money. But for paying them an extra $20,000-$30,000. It didn't look good to the NCM 20 group. I thought it was stupid. But I was making 30 grand a month, and then I was making 450 a month a year later. Long answer, short question. Sorry.
No worries. Well, I was in a dealership actually in Tampa when I worked for a company called Dealer Effects. Karen and I were talking about a little earlier. And when I got off the plane at the airport, I was waiting for I think a taxi or an Uber or whatever. And they had a big fan. It was very humid. They had a big fan blowing hot air at people waiting for taxis, which I thought was a little bit nuts. But it got crazier. So I went to a Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram store in the market, and they had 80 service bays. They had a night shift where people were servicing cars at 2 or 3 in the morning. They had a parts guy working on it. But what they had was these things called big ass fans. That's the little name of the fan.
Yeah, I know what they call, yeah.
So they had these fans on the ceiling that were blowing the hot air down on the technicians who were working on the cars. And I was like, not only does that make no sense, that doesn't help anybody. Like, why am I blowing hot air on the guy or the gal, whoever it is working on the car? I just thought that was hilarious.
What a great example. I was in a store, and I'm not going to name the store, it doesn't make a difference. And they were losing technicians.
Yeah.
Like I was losing hair 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And they couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
And we're here in Florida, and it's it's 90 degrees in the summer, and it's 110 inside, and it costs a lot of money to air condition shop.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
$200,000, $400,000, $600,000, a lot of money there. $1 million, a lot of money. But you're talking about a shop that can keep 4 more techs working all the time because they'll want to work there in the air conditioning shop. A tech puts $300,000 a year on books and gross profit. And for that, so they pay for the air conditioner twice a year by keeping those 4 techs.
Yep.
But you know what? So this is the life we chose.
Well, I worked with a Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram dealership in Dubai. So in Dubai, they air condition the shop for obvious reasons. It's very, very humid. But they also service vehicles where people really don't care what it costs. I mean, I saw a vehicle there that was I think it was a Jeep Grand Cherokee where it had a 50 caliber turret on it that swiveled around. And I said, what is that military? He goes, oh no, that's a private vehicle. That was very interesting. Anyway, Karen, I had another question for you. Matthew Grodin's joining us late as predicted. So I had a question for you. How can dealers start the planning process and set themselves up for success in 2026, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, they need to sit down with their team, and everybody needs to be on the same page. And they need to set those goals, and not just look at everything at the end of the month. We've all seen dealers. Here it is, the end of the month. We haven't met our goals, so we're going to keep the books up for a couple of days. And all that does is take away from the next month. So they need to know long before the end of the month where they stand. And in order to do that, like I said, everybody needs to be on the same team and not working against one another. Sales where you get service, where you get sales, used cars. So I think it's huge.
100%. I remember when I sold cars and a manager would roll and he'd go, how many cars did you sell last month? 15. Okay, this month you're going to sell 25. Well, how am I going to do that? Oh, don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. I was like, really? Then the next guy was like, you just constantly raise that, but he wouldn't add anything, which I always thought was hilarious. Good morning, Mr. Matthew Groden. Tell us more about who you are and what you do, and more importantly, answer the question: how can dealers start the planning process for success? I know you know a little bit about technology. Go ahead.
I know a little bit about technology.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I'm Matthew Groden. People call me Growdy. People, no one else on the call, I think, knows who I am. But people listening may or do. I have worked in consumer e-commerce for my entire adult life, meaning I've either tried to sell things online or advertise things to sell online, either through e-commerce or through ads. I spent a decade at Google, and that's how a lot of folk in automotive know me from my time at the automotive ad sales team in Canada. And now I do a bunch of things. So I'm doing a variety of different consulting work across the industry in automotive. I teach at the Automotive Business School of Canada at Georgian College, and I write a newsletter every week about the automotive industry called thechangeoptimist.com. I think I might have told this story at one of your other Auto Hub shows, but I was doing a presentation a little over a year ago where I was particularly scathing dealers in the industry. I called the presentation "Leads Are Destroying Your Business," and it's provocative. Peter, it's provocative. At the end of it, I had a person in the room, a GM, was like, "Well, what's the one thing I should do?" And I was like, "You think there's only one thing? Like, why are we limiting ourselves to one thing?" And I said, if I were going to, and I said, in the spirit of giving you one thing, but I'm going to answer the question with a question. And I said, "What does your annual plan say?" And he looked at me like I was speaking in a foreign language. And I said, "Right, you don't have one. You don't have an annual plan." So, I mean, the challenge a little bit, I think, culture-wise, because in that presentation I talked about the 30-day flywheel, the 30-day cycle, is that some people in the business have to be able to operate outside of 30 days. That you need some group of people who are assigned the task of managing the operation, and that you think they exist, but they kind of don't. We're tasked with okay, if we were going to think about all the other things we need to do in our business that don't necessarily explicitly relate to selling and servicing cars, what are the other things we need to do? And to build a plan in addition to our sales targets, to actually say okay, this year we're going to take a serious look at staffing, or hiring practices, or culture, or technology, right? That we're going to identify the other areas that would be second nature in any other business that seem to be completely missing from the dealership business in any kind of meaningful way, and then build a plan around that and assign it to people the same way you would assign tasks in any other business, to be like, okay, this quarter we're really going to understand why we're spending so much money with various vendors. And then next quarter, we're going to spend a lot of time focused on our hiring practices and employee retention. And then and maybe some of these things are bigger than a quarter. But if you don't have people who are focused on the tasks or focused on the projects, then they're just never going to get done. And your life is always going to be a 30-day flywheel. So a lot of that is perspective, and some of that is, doing some amount of research or some amount of conversation around what does our annual plan look like? What's our 5-year plan, which sounds completely outlandish in the dealership universe. And then let's build a plan that gets us there, and allocating the resources and the people to actually be responsible for those things beyond the, selling the cars this month.
Thanks very much for that. So, Peter, tell us more about what you do and what you think on the 30-day planning process, or to Matthew's point, the more than one thing maybe you want to do next year?
Well, 2-minute overview. Peter Martin, been around for God knows how long, 32 years with Cactus Guy. I've either been working in dealerships, owning dealerships, or marketing for dealerships. Moved into from traditional advertising into digital. That's where my sweet spot is. So I've got the unique opportunity, because I work with a lot of vendors selling products and services to car dealers. So I get to see what they're doing and how they're doing it, then working with the dealers and seeing how that impacts. So I get to look at it from a number of different eyes. And one of the biggest things, and I know it's been mentioned a couple different times, and we had this in the last couple of shows, it's really about going from the 30-day mindset to a larger, longer term, because everything's always done in 30 days. Even when I was doing advertising, if we had a bad month and the store didn't do well, it was my fault because the advertising didn't work. And there's never any long-term planning. And it always comes down to investing in the people. We've been talking a lot about that. We've got to build the people, we got to build the teams, and have the tools, like Karen was talking about some of the benefits of her product and the reporting, but not just looking at it in 30 days. We have to have a plan and give people the opportunity to grow and work to be successful. So I think if we could change anything going into 2026, if we could get the owners and the managers to change their mindset from, hey, what did you do for me last month? Whether you're a vendor, you're a salesperson, a manager, what did you do for me last month? And always look at it that way, say, hey, here's our plan. Let's do, even if it's 90 days, do a 90-day window. Here's our plan for 90 days. Let's set a 90-day goal instead of a 30-day goal. Because that way, everything changes. I mean, we've had such a topsy-turvy year this year between the terrorists, the election, the riots. You know, a lot of consumers out there just weren't looking to buy anything because they were afraid of what's going on. And then you turn around and you take all these outside forces that are affecting the business. At the end of the day, you're looking at 30 days, well, we had a bad month. I don't hear about excuses. We had a bad month. So I think if we could change that mindset, we're going to have a much better future, because it also gives us the opportunity to leverage all of the tools that are available in the reporting and have a better picture than just looking at it in a 30-day window. A 90-day window gives a better picture and also helps for future planning.
Fantastic. So Karen, I mean, I know that dealers are on this 30-day cycle. How do they get started with maybe a 90-day cycle or an annual cycle or a quarterly cycle? Like, how do they start with that when they don't know how to do anything more than 30 days? Like, what do you recommend? You're muted, by the way, Karen. You're still muted. Give her a sec. There you go.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think they need to begin with the end in mind. They need to determine where they need to go and what I need to do to get there. But I need to look at my business every day, every week, not just 30 days, and work toward that end goal. Because if I don't have it, I don't know what it takes to get there.
That's a great answer. Yeah, start with the end in mind, and then just like you're eating a dinosaur, eat it in small bites, right? It's a great advice. Michael, what do you think? I mean, how do you change this 30-day mindset other than, you know, waking them up with some coffee or something? Go ahead.
Leadership engagement, and this starts at the top. You know, I want my leadership team in the store to run this business like they own it. And I want to talk to them about that in that context daily, so that they want to build something as opposed to just get something done today. And the classic example could be, you know, I have an advisor that's a great salesperson in the lane, and he's very capable of selling, or she's very capable of selling services that aren't necessary, as an example. So I'm going to make an extra $200 on that repair order. That's great. And my guest is going to find out about that. And they're not going to make a phone call. They're not going to complain so I can make it right. They're just not going to come back. And they're going to tell 10 people or 100 people online. And eventually I'm going to be out of business. And so I want my leadership team to take a long view. And I want them to understand that they're part of something more than just a financial statement at the end of the month. And yeah, that's how we pay them. But I typically put pay plans in place that also have a percentage of the net profit as bonuses at the end of the year. So that way they're looking at something bigger than that. And I tell you something interesting there. So you get your bonuses measured on the year-end statement, but you don't get the bonus until the 1st of July of the following year. And the caveat is that in order to get the bonus, you gotta still be working here. So I've got my hooks in you, and you're not going anywhere because you may have $5, $10, $20, $30,000 coming.
Yeah.
And you don't want to walk away from that 30 grand. And you will walk away from it if you're not there July 1st. And then on July 1st, you can't walk away from it because you got 15 grand accrued, a bonus that you're going to earn that the next year. But it gives them a little bit longer term perspective. But even dealers deal themselves who have the money invested. Not many are looking at or top of mind as to what the value of their asset is going to be, as opposed to what kind of dividend they can take out of the store on a monthly basis. And it's just a culture issue. That's all. Most of them started as salespeople. And so as salespeople, that's what they thought about. What am I going to make at the end of the month?
Right.
And, I don't know. It's just the nature of the beast.
Excellent. So Matthew, you train at the Business School of Canada. You're training obviously existing dealers and new dealers and probably kids of dealers. I mean, what are you telling them to not be maybe like what their dad or their grandfather thought? I mean, what are you teaching there?
What am I teaching there? I mean, I think it's kind of a funny exercise, especially right now, although this is not the topic of today's session. But because even before, AI became a household phrase, I have tried to instill in my students this notion of you can't stop learning new things. That anything I might teach them about digital marketing, social media, Google ads, meta ads today is probably going to be out of date by the time they graduate. And that the only defense against that is to be a lifelong learner, right? So it's something I repeat multiple times throughout a semester to be able to say, I'm going to teach you some things because they're things I think you need to learn. I'm going to teach you some things because they're the requirements of the course. Province makes it a requirement. And I'm like, and I'm going to teach you some things because I think you need to know them as a human being. And in that human being side of things, it's really this, you can't stop learning. And I do think so how do you get a dealership to think outside the 30-day box is you have to arm them with certain language, like let's talk about the art of the possible. Like what could you be doing that you're not doing? Like how could you operate differently? How could you have better retention of your employees? I think Karen's dead on the money around picking the outcomes, but I also think as the kind of cornerstone around, okay, well, here's a thing we want to accomplish. How long is that going to take? The other thing is to think about all of the business areas we've been ignoring, right? And that is usually around things like human resources and technology and facilities improvement. It doesn't even have to be big things. Like I suggested, one of the weird things I've talked a lot about dealerships over the years is like coffee at dealerships. Right? When it comes to the consumer today, everyone at a dealership gets offered free coffee, but many of us have very specific coffee needs.
Right.
So are you providing the right need? Are you addressing the right need by giving them the free coffee in dealership? And my counterpoint is you're offering people free coffee, but what they want is free Wi-Fi. Right. And you have free Wi-Fi, but you didn't tell anyone you had free Wi-Fi in the dealership. So what message are we trying to deliver? And when it comes to things like planning, it's like, okay, well, which of those things is actually more important? And should we do a better job of communicating the things we already do right here that we're just not telling anyone about? So is there a communications plan? Or frankly, is there a plan to offer better coffee? Could we build a project around what does better coffee at dealership look like? Sounds like a funny thing, but then it kind of goes through, and I've used this many times in various meetings and presentations of what I describe or what I borrow from James Clear is the aggregation of marginal gains, right?
Yeah.
So these projects, this planning doesn't need to be revolutionary. We don't need to reinvent the dealership per se. We just need to find all of the opportunities in the business that we can improve like 1%, which was kind of the premise of the marginal gains argument. So find all of the things we can improve a small amount, and by improving all of those things, we improve the business overall.
Yeah, like you look at Las Vegas, since I'm going to NADA 2026, and they have these resort fees. Well, what's really funny to look at is what you get for these resort fees. So if you go to pick your hotel chain and you look at what you get, you have things like free local calling from your room. Like, who uses that? Nobody. Like, you know, if you're going to put something down, like you're justifying your hot dog fee, like think about it, man. Like, what is it you're actually providing for that? Not saying you shouldn't charge it, but what are you providing for that, to your point? Like, I remember when I sold cars 25 years ago, I paid for the coffee, even though I didn't drink it. But to your point, it was like, you know, 1985 drip coffee from wherever they got it cheap. So it was kind of funny. Go ahead, Peter. What do you think? You're muted, by the way.
I love what Matt said because it's so true. And and this is really going to be funny because we're having this conversation about changing things. But I go back to when coffee became something that we had at the dealership, and the challenge we had getting the dealers to just agree to put it in. I mean, it was literally like, you know, pulling teeth. And then Starbucks had this little program. We're trying to get the Starbucks in there. We would advertise free Starbucks coffee, you know, and back in the day, that was like a great hook to get people in. So they get my dealers to agree to give free coffee and then to pay the extra money for the Starbucks coffee. It was like I was asking them for, you know, the firstborn male child. And today, I was at a store a couple of weeks ago, and I went in there, and they had one of these massive machines down there that you ground the coffee, and you could press all these buttons, and it was all computerized. If you wanted a caramel macchiato, or if you wanted a cafe espresso, or a chocolate, whatever you had. And literally, the machine did whatever you could want. And the people were like, constantly, I was sitting down there watching a little while, and they were just constantly walking by, enjoying it. But it's so funny how it was such a big mindset to change that. But we could get them thinking about, you know, going from 30 days to 90 days or a year planning it out. But it's going to be a challenge. Dealers, you know, don't like to change. But, you know, the coffee was a perfect example. I'm really glad that was brought up because it was so funny to watch how that happened.
Well, I worked at a dealer, believe it or not, they used to charge the customers for coffee. And I sold the car to a customer. The customer was so upset. They called the dealer like, you are ridiculous. So then after they lost that car deal because they weren't happy, he put a sign on all proceeds from the coffee sales go to this charity. So he didn't hear the message from the customer, which I thought was hilarious. So
let me throw one thing real quick. And it's funny talking about the changes. And I remember exactly when it was. It was 1988. And Galpin Ford was the first dealership. They were the #1 Ford store. I was with Reichert Ford at the time. I was in the management team, and they beat us out for the #1 position. I'll never forget because Brett Reichert flew me out, told me to go see what they were doing. And Galpin Ford was the first dealership ever to put a cafe in the dealership. And it was amazing. It was the smartest thing because they're high volume, and quite frankly, it could be 2 to 3 hours before you got into F&I. So what they would do is instead of having people get all bent out of shape because they're waiting to get an F&I to drive home in their car, they would give them a coupon. Here, go have dinner on us. Go have lunch on us. And that whole thing was creative, but it was back then out of necessity. And now look around today. I mean, there was a store I was at recently where they actually have a full restaurant called the Ford Garage. You know the store goes up, you know, right next to the dealership. And it's smart business. You've got to keep the customers happy, but it's a hard thing to do because it takes someone willing to make that change. But they don't realize that little investment goes so far because you're keeping the customer happy and you're building that loyalty.
Well, think about having a store in the north or the south with this big barbecue culture and having a barbecue restaurant. Just think about what that does to that store versus every other store around that can sell you that Ford or Chev or whatever it might be. So what do you think the benefits are of short, medium, and long-term planning in automotive? Let's start with Michael on this. Go ahead, Michael.
The benefits of short-term planning get you the results long-term. So I want to talk about a couple of words, a couple of things that I think are very important in terms of planning. And that I don't use the word objectives and goals in the store. I use the word commitment.
Okay.
I don't want to know what your objective is in terms of revenue, sales volume. repair orders, margins, gross profit for the month. I want to know what you're committed to. And I want you to look at me and give me a number, and we'll work on the number together and make a commitment that you're going to be there. And then in terms of short and long term, I'm a big believer in small course corrections. So you give me a commitment at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of the year, or whatever that is, as a manager or as an associate, or as an advisor, or as a service director, fixed ops director, whatever it is, and you tell me what you're going to deliver, and how are you going to get there, and how are we going to measure if you're doing not to measure the results, but how are we going to measure if you're actually doing the work you said you're going to do? Are you running your play? You know what? In the NFL, it's easy enough to run the play. They got video and Microsoft services. I can watch and see if you turn the 30-yard line to the 40-yard line. I can watch and see if you block your defender. But in what we do for a living is not so easy. So a dealer needs to be engaged, or his GM needs to be engaged in every department throughout the day, and making certain that when the service manager says that an advisor is going to walk around to every vehicle when they write that vehicle up, that we see that that's happening. And when the sales manager tells us that every sales associate is going to walk around every trade with a customer before we're car deal, we need to be out there on the lot in the showroom and make certain that's happening. So when we meet the next day, day number 1 out of 365 or day number 101 out of 365, and we say, okay, where should we be right now based on what your commitment is? And whether it's a month commitment or a year commitment or a week commitment, whatever it is. And we say, where are we now? Are we ahead of the curve, behind the curve? And if we're ahead of the curve, let's make sure, are we far enough ahead of the curve and to avoid a blow up or catastrophe that'll put us behind the curve? Or we run the play every time, or we're just being lucky? And if we're behind the curve, what do we got to do in terms of results to get ahead of it? And are you running the play to make certain? And typically what you find is if you make small course corrections, they're so much easier to fix. But I make a commitment. Again, let's go back to the 30-day. You make a commitment, and as manager, you tell me to put $1 million of variable gross on the books, and it's 10th of the month. You got 50,000 on the books, and that doesn't add up to $1 million at the end of the month. Well, if I wait till the 10th to find that out, you're not going to get to $1 million. But if on the second day of the month, we sit down and say, what did you put on the books yesterday? Well, I put 7,000 on the books. Oh, well, how's 7,000 going to get us to $1 million in 29 days? Let's take a look at what your commitment is on how many phone calls your team has made. What's the commitment on how many TOs you took on your team took? What's your commitment in terms of, is the lot looking right? So let's get to granular detail, because the people say, well, I'm not big on the details. But retail is detail. And if you manage the details, everything else is good. It's not going to take care of itself, but everything will jiggle closer to get between the lines. And if you keep doing it on a daily basis, and even not daily basis, even a moment-to-moment basis, I get to work at 7:30, I get out of there at 6 o'clock, at 6:30. I got 10 and a half, 11 hours to get the job done. I'm not managing the 101st Airborne with 40,000 soldiers or such like that. I got 150 associates. I can manage to be engaged in the workspace of 150 associates throughout the day, and 10 leaders on my leadership team every single day, maybe twice, to make certain that if corrections need to be corrected, that they're doing it, and then review it 6 hours later or the next morning. Did you do it?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's great advice. When you look at, you got to expect what you expect, to your point, but more importantly, if those short course corrections, and my dad was a big sailor, as was I as a kid, if you're not monitoring that sail to get that to that destination, then yeah, you got a problem. You might have to make some changes there. So great thoughts there. Karen, what do you think? I mean, you work a lot with service departments. What do you think on the service side? I mean, being the most important side these days with long ownership terms, what do you think?
Well, I want to go back to one thing that Michael said when he was talking about the service advisor that was a great salesperson that kind of ripped off the customer, so they lost a customer. I think one of the biggest challenges in talking to a dealer today is they're not paying enough attention that their best sales are going to come from service. If they treat that service customer right, they're much more likely to come back there to buy their car. So putting some plans in place, not only for service, but for sales. Because if I sell a car and I sell that customer coming to my dealership for service, and they come to that dealership for service and they're treated well, then they're going to come more likely to come out for sales. So that can make a huge difference in the overall profit for the dealership. And I do not believe there are enough dealers that place that kind of importance.
100%. I was talking to a gentleman I work with. His wife has a Mercedes Benz, and she was at some body shop work done on it. And the salesman was trying to sell her a new set of tires with a technique I'd never heard of, where they put paint on the tires and they were saying something, and it just sounded more and more fishy the more I listened to it. And I said to him, I said, well, did you actually look at the depth tread on the tire? Did they go through that? No, they just put paint on the tire, and they said she needed to buy 2 tires. And I thought that was really kind of bizarre, but more importantly, is that going to guarantee future body shop or service work for them? Probably not. So it was really explaining it to her so she had clarity, but more importantly, it was the right thing to do, is to say, hey, it's a safety concern. Here's why, versus some sort of, snake oil treatment, which is what I thought. But what do you think, Matthew?
I'm going to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So this was after we moved to Naples, and the lease on my husband's Mercedes was coming out.
Okay.
And he said, do not get me another Mercedes, because if I have to go to that dealership, I'll end up going to jail. Because they are so horrible. They just treat you so horribly. So he ended up getting a Cadillac. But there's just a great example of not taking care of those people in service.
Oh yeah, I mean the thing that I think a lot of dealers don't understand from the eyes of the customer, and not people in the industry but outside the industry, they look at that dealership as a reflection of the brand. They don't see it as a dealership owned by a franchisee. They say that's Cadillac, that's Mercedes, that's BMW. And when you mistreat that customer, you kind of taint them to the brand, good or bad. And I agree with you 100%. If someone does a bad job, that could impact the lifetime of that customer's purchase decision. So it's definitely very interesting. Thanks for that. Matthew?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the benefit of long-term planning or thinking beyond that 30-day box, 30-day cycle, I think that you've got 2 core benefits, right? One is you have the opportunity to address some of the more systemic customer-facing issues, like we've been talking here about very specific things. But it allows you, I think, and again, in that planning, there's so much, you could build an entire course around, like, what does this planning look like? How long should you take? Who should be involved? What parts of the business? If you have a solid cross-functional group of folk from sales, from service, from operations, I would also include the receptionist, because they see things no one else sees. And then you talk about what are the things we need to, what are the projects we should do? And they're usually built around things that are already broken in the business that you weren't paying attention to, right? At least that's where a lot of, initially when companies sit down, regardless of size and scale, the things they want to address project-wise are like, we know there's a gap here. We know there's a problem here. How do we fix it? So if you can start with those fixing of those, whatever it is, you're probably going to learn some things you didn't know about your own business, right? You're probably going to then, by the default of addressing those things, you're going to improve those CSAT numbers, those customer satisfaction numbers, or NPS, if that's a thing that people are using, right? And I think when you hear kind of the communication of like CSAT numbers from OEM to dealer, the dealer pretty much gets that in the email and then ignores it, right? That they're not using that as a tool to actually monitor and manage their business. But if they could be convinced that they could actually adjust the number, right? Or if they could be convinced without, jury rigging the survey results by bribing customers to give them a favorable response, that they could improve the actual customer satisfaction overall, then they're going to build a better business, right? They're going to build a better business. And when the business is better, people are going to feel better about working there. So it's kind of funny how, addressing business challenges, whatever they are, has this secondary effect of making people feel better about working there. And then I think that will be reflected in those data points. It gets reflected in NPS and CSAT numbers.
Yeah, if you have happy employees, they tend to treat your customers better, right?
100%.
Peter?
I just want to follow up with what Matthew said, because, look at NADA this year, there's going to be 500 or 600 vendors, and they're all coming in there and they've got some new widget and this new great thing to fix a problem like what Matthew was talking about.
Are they using AI to do it? Are they using? No, sorry.
Oh, it's like half of them are about AI. Everyone's got some sort of AI something, but it's so funny but there are all these products, and going back to this planning and kind of going full circle back to what we're talking about. Dealers are notorious, and I work with the vendors, and I'm the guy helping them sell to the dealers, so I see it all the time. And the dealers get all excited to go to NADA and they buy the next greatest thing, a new silver bullet. And the problem is they look at it on a small little window. They just say, okay, here, we're going to implement this, and let's look at it over a year or 6 months even. And if it's not working the way they want, it literally gets thrown into the back, and it's now, on a parts shelf. And there's been times in my career I've gone into a dealership and I just looked and I said, let's do a review of all of the advertising related products you have. And some dealers will have 2 or 3 different call tracking services. They have 3 or 4 different companies all doing the same thing, because someone comes in there, they sell them the shiny penny, they get all excited, they start using it, but they don't have a long-term focus. And it goes back to what Karen and Michael was talking about. When you're looking at the store, you've got to have a plan, and you got to look at the numbers, but then you have to look at all the tools and your team to help you get there. So I think you hit the nail right on the head about all these different things out there. And it's all about trying to have a plan. It's going to be something that they measure and look at.
So to say to that, I mean, obviously, if you're going to NADA 2026 and you're looking at 500 vendors, do you have a plan for that? I mean, did you take a look and do an audit of the tools you already have that maybe you like or you dislike, or maybe you want to look for an upgrade or a replacement versus just going there and buying stuff? I mean, I think that's great advice. Michael, I mean, what is your opinion on NADA as we're getting up to that? But also, what do you think the final thoughts you would have on planning and the benefits, in your opinion? I mean, you've dealt with a number of dealers.
I like to reverse engineer.
Okay.
And determine what I want my results to be, and then map out what needs to happen in order to get there. It's a math equation. That's all.
So how would you advise a dealer who doesn't understand that? It's too complicated for him.
Yeah, that is pretty much phone number.
Okay, fair enough. There will be details below in the episode.
Right, I'll teach you how to do it. It's not very complicated to know where you want to be. First, you want to look at how much you have invested.
Okay.
And how much, and what do you think is the right return? Well, if a dealer's got $50 million worth of line invested, whether it's cash or borrowed money, it's still his investment. He can make 5% on long-term treasury bonds and never put on a pair of shoes in his life. He can make 2.5 million dollars a year doing nothing. So you got to make 3 times that, 4 times that, taking on the risk of running the dealership. So how am I going to make $7.5 million this year? $625,000 net a month. Or $10 million this year, $833 a month. How many cars I got to sell? How much gross profit I got to generate? What kind of expense can I handle in that context? How many cars do I got to repair? What kind of margins do I got to hold? How many hours per repair order? And then get my management team and put the onus upon them to tell me how they're going to be part of this solution, how they're going to champion this solution. Because if I give them the solution, it's not their solution, it's my solution. They're not going to do it. When it doesn't work, it's my fault because they gave me a shitty solution.
Yeah.
So they have to come up with a plan. I'll guide them, use guided discovery to the right plan. So it's the dealer's responsibility to determine what the result has to be. Then he's got to get the buy-in from his leadership team that they can deliver that result. Then he's got to use guided discovery to build a plan to not just what are they going to do, but how are they going to be held accountable, and how is their players going to be held accountable to executing that play flawlessly on a moment-to-moment basis. Because we're planning for the long term, for a year, for 5 years, for 10 years. But we're also planning minute to minute because what we do, again, small course corrections.
Understand. Yeah. If you don't have a target, you miss it every single time, right? Karen, what do you think?
Well, I think part of the problem in many dealerships is the dealer says, okay, here's what we want to, here's how we want to end up the year. So you go make it happen. Instead of getting all the managers involved and getting their feedback and their thoughts. But then you need to get the associates involved as well. You know, the sales manager needs to, let's say, new car sales manager needs to talk to the salespeople and say, okay, here's where we want to be at the end of the month. What do each of you need to do to make that happen? And let them buy into it, as opposed to just showing up and not, and oh yeah, I got enough. You know, a good example, this has been years ago, but I was doing a sales meeting up in the Boston area. And so all these sales, Saturday morning, all these salespeople are sitting around, did not want to be there, right? But I just went into one and I said, let me ask you a question. How many hours do you work a day? He said, I'm here bell to bell. I'm going, no, that's not what I asked. How many hours do you work a day? And it kind of got quiet in there. And I just had seen the night before, they were panning Boston Garden, and the only person before the game that was out shooting baskets was Larry Bird. And I said, so let me ask you, do you think he's the best God-given talent basketball player that's ever played? You know, why is he so good? Because he works at his craft. And you need to work at your craft. And they need to bring that attention to those people on the floor and the people in service.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's only 5 reasons people don't buy a car, and 4 of them were true when they bought horses. The question is, do you know the 5? And more importantly, can you handle them? And I would argue the same is true on the service drive. Is basically, why are someone not buying this product or service that they need for their car? Because you don't understand the objections, but more importantly, you deal with it every day and you don't get better at handling it. And this is true in a wider spectrum. If you look at any product on the market, there's usually 12 to 14 objections, but when you narrow it down, it's usually 5 to 7. But to your point, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, but you probably have to practice before you take the shot, right? So you really need to look at that and say, okay, I'm successful because I failed a lot, but more importantly, because I practiced a lot, right? Matthew, what do you think? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I mean, it is the Ben Franklin, like, failing to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah.
Right. And it is just staggering to me that a dealership as a business with the amount of revenue that they actually generate in a year is consistently not planning, right? And I think more than ever, with so much change, I think, Peter, you were laying this all out earlier around like tariffs and inventory shifts, and now we're back to talking about chip shortages of a different sort. Having some sort of set of contingencies, like what are your operational contingencies as a business if you don't have a plan? Like what are you anticipating will happen come Q2, Q3, and what is the business's focus at that point? And if you're not sitting down and having that conversation, well, you might as well just lock the doors and not even let people come in and drink your shitty coffee. Like, just turn them away, because you're just going to frustrate them and yourselves.
Yeah, what's the chance you can retire if you had no plan and didn't save any money? Probably not very high. Thanks for that. Peter, final thoughts? You are muted.
I'm good. Final thoughts. I'm very excited. This was a great session today. I think there was some great information. The biggest thing I could highly recommend is let's try and change what we look at. Instead of looking at the 30-day window, let's make a minimum of a 90-day window, put a plan in place, and listen to some of these great people we have on the call today. I appreciate everybody joining us today, because there's a lot of value in your contribution. So I want to thank you all for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have yourself a great week. All the best for the holiday season and the new year. And of course, if you're at NADA, I will be at the NUMA booth, so I'll be doing interviews there at the show. And definitely stop by. I'll have some Auto Hub show gear at no cost as gratis for anyone who shows up. So I'll have hats and shirts for the show. Have yourself a great week. And remember, you can only change one habit at a time, much like at the end of the year when you do a New Year's resolution. The same is true with dealers. Don't try and change everything that's broken immediately, but you definitely have to change more than one thing. Right, Matthew?
Probably more than one. Probably there's more than one thing that needs to happen. Yeah.
Likely. Have yourself a great week. Thanks for taking the time. Bye for now.